Advancing Poultry Veterinary Medicine Through Innovation, a Prairie Livestock Veterinarians presentation. Welcome back to Poultry TV. We're going to start a journey through a podcast and editorial series through poultryproducer.com, highlighting the innovative contributions of the Prairie Livestock Veterinarians, PLV, to the field of poultry medicine. The series will dive into pioneering research, technological advancements, health management strategies, and educational initiatives that are shaping the future of poultry health and welfare. Join Dr. Teryn and her colleagues as they share their experiences and visions for the industry. Welcome to episode 1, Pioneering Research in Poultry Medicine. Dr. Teryn, Dr. Hayley, and Dr. Chantel, let's start with your brief introductions and roles to the industry, please.
Awesome. Thanks, Jim. Yes, and my name is Dr. Teryn. I am a poultry veterinarian with Prairie Livestock Veterinarians. I've been a poultry veterinarian for about 5 years now, and before that, I received a master's in poultry ethology, so essentially behavior, at the University of Alberta.
Yeah, my name is Dr. Hayley. I joined the PLV team about a year ago, and I do swine medicine as well as poultry medicine. So it's fun to kind of integrate the two together in my practice.
Hey, Jim, nice to meet you. My name is Dr. Chantel, and I newly graduated from the University of Calgary, and I've been involved with Prairie Livestock in a student capacity for the past 3 years, and then just started as a poultry veterinarian in May. So looking forward to getting started with the poultry team here.
The team continues to expand. You guys are doing great work in the field. We talked about it before we started. To get 3 vets together is a special occasion here. So current research projects, let's start with Dr. Chantel. What are you working on?
So in my final year of vet school, I actually did a 10-week study looking at infectious bronchitis virus in Alberta broilers. And so what we found there was we surveyed the broiler industry in Alberta and found that about 82% of producers in Alberta are vaccinating for bronchitis. And then we further tracked vaccinated and unvaccinated flocks and their titers. And so current studies that are coming out of that are, we want to look at birds that are getting vaccinated for bronchitis at the hatchery, and if there's any interference or any sort of reaction between maternal antibodies to bronchitis and birds that are getting vaccinated at the hatchery. So that's a new project that's kind of in the pipeline right now, and we look forward to getting some results from that in the future.
And Dr. Hayley, you're working on a nitrogen trial?
Yeah, so it's pretty exciting work, like with outbreaks of high-path AI, resulting in widespread shortages of carbon dioxide gas being used for mass depopulation for disease reasons. There's been increasing interest kind of across North America in alternative ways to do mass depopulation humanely. And so one option that's being explored at the moment is using nitrogen gas as an alternative, because it can be less expensive, possibly more readily available in outbreak type scenarios, and also possibly less aversive to birds. So yeah, we've been really fortunate to be a part of some really important, really cool research into this option. I can't say too much more at the moment. Results are not finalized, but yeah, it's pretty neat stuff.
And Dr. Teryn, you're working on a transportation trial?
Yeah, we've kind of put a few things in the pipe right now. So we are interested in how transportation of poultry affects gut health, and then what would be consequences of that in long life birds. So we're working towards starting that trial, hopefully sooner than later. We've been really fortunate to work with both the University of Alberta and the University of Calgary Veterinary Medicine, where it feels like this summer, every time we have a question in the field, we write it on a whiteboard, and then we write to one of the universities, and then we have a trial started. So We've got some really fun trials going off of Chantel's initial trial of bronchitis that we're working towards. And then, yeah, hopefully the transportation trial as well.
So I want to get into a little bit about the inspiration with your career. I know, Teryn, you're the vet now. Hayley, you're dabbling in multi-species, and Chantel, you're kind of newer to the field. Let's start with you, Chantel, and we'll go around the table. What's the inspiration behind your career in the poultry industry?
Well, I've always been interested in production animal before I got involved with poultry. I was involved in the Alberta beef industry, and sort of going into my career as a veterinarian, I kind of felt it was my duty to get involved and provide a service to producers and animals where we can provide, safe and affordable protein sources for society. But what really transitioned me into the poultry industry, well, one is that I met Dr. Teryn, and she is just so passionate about poultry that it some of it rubbed off onto me, and so I naturally found myself getting involved in poultry. But I just thoroughly enjoy working with poultry producers. I'm always just amazed at their willingness to improve in whatever ways possible to, of course, improve welfare of the birds, and always looking at alternative ways to manage health and disease challenges. So it's just been an absolute pleasure, meeting and getting to work with some really awesome people out there.
Hayley?
Yeah, so I kind of, growing up, I was that kid that always wanted to be a veterinarian, but I thought it would be like, dogs and cats and horses and things. And eventually decided that wasn't for me, and kind of looked into research as a possible career path, and I went to the University of Saskatchewan and did a bachelor's degree in the College of Agriculture. And so in my third year, I got involved in some animal welfare research in the poultry lab there with Dr. Karen Schwain-Lardner, and just spent time in the barns helping out kind of casually, and just really came to love working with the birds, and loved the idea of, behavior as an indicator of health and welfare, and yeah, just really fell in love with it. So then I kind of applied to vet school, knowing that I wanted to do population production animal medicine. And yeah, met Teryn, said I wanted to do swine and poultry, and she said, I'll hire you in 4 years. And here we are.
And what about you, Teryn? I know we go back a little bit. I know you joined the podcast several years ago and growing your team, and you've got a great passion.
Yeah, I think we've talked about this before. I was really fortunate to get some mentorship that changed my life. Frank Robinson and Martin Zudoff. I had an undergrad and I didn't know what I wanted to do. I had been traveling around the world, and then I came back to Canada and met Frank and Martin, and they kind of steered me into poultry, and the community of the poultry research scientists at the time it just felt like I belonged. And then once I got into vet school, just kind of kept coming back to poultry. It's what has come easiest to me out of the different species that we would work with. And as I got closer and closer to graduation and got to work with birds again, like I just loved being around poultry. I realized that I loved poultry producers almost as much as I loved the birds. So between the community of poultry, commercial poultry, poultry research, and actually small flock poultry too, and just the birds, and then the lifestyle, and now this team that we have, this is the only place I want to be.
So the people, the science, the health, it all kind of connects together. Now, this can be an open floor question. The impact of understanding poultry behavior on health and welfare.
I can start with that because I think out of the three of us, I'm the least focused. And so sometimes when I get into the barn, I just have to stop everything and I have to just stop and listen. And it's taken me a long time to figure that out. And producers will often do it before I do it. And then I'm able to say, oh yeah, that's what, like, I don't need to look for the problem. I don't need to look for the solution. I just need to listen to the birds. And so I think if you can go into a barn, I think being on farm is important, being in the field is important. And then when you get into the barn, if you can give the birds the time so that you can listen to them, you can watch them, you can smell, right? And you can start to understand different cues from them. I think that can point you in a way either of what's wrong, what's bothering them, or what may be coming down the pipe. So it could even be helpful in a preventative stance. So if the ventilation is off and you see those spots without birds in the barn, you can start looking at that and then see what the poop's looking like in that area. When I learned to tap into poultry behavior is when I think I learned how to be a better vet.
So when you talk about behavior, it's more than like the behavior, there's a root cause. So identifying how the bird's acting, it's more than just what the cause is.
Yeah, like, and Hayley and Chantel can speak to this too. Sometimes, I was in a layer barn with Hayley and we were walking the barn and we went before the producer, and so the birds were just not happy. And by happy, I mean they weren't comfortable with us being there. So then Hayley said, so and so, can you walk in front of us? And then when he walked in front of us and the bird saw him first, then they had a little more calm behavior that then we could work with and say, okay, now it's normal. Does this side of the barn feel the same as the end of the barn?
Yeah, and I think that really speaks to like the relationship that producers have with their birds, especially in those long life birds. Like they know them so well, they know their barn so well, and each barn is so unique and its challenges and what kind of is considered normal in that facility. So when we go in, we kind of just get a snapshot, but listening to how the producer is interpreting their behavior of their own birds is really important. Like we have a term in veterinary medicine called ADR, which is very scientific, and it stands for ain't doing right. And so producers call and say like, I don't know, they're not right. Then that really helps us kind of start to get to the bottom of things.
Now, what about the challenges with poultry research? Are there challenges? What do we need to know?
Field research in poultry is hard because the birds don't read the textbook. I think actually Chantel should answer this more than any of us, because and Hayley too, they've both finished field research trials where you can prepare for everything and then the birds do the exact opposite. So I'll let them answer that.
Yeah, it can certainly pose a challenge, but I think some of our most valuable information can come from field research, because it's one thing to receive results from a lab bench. It's a completely other thing to pair results with whatever factors could be going on in the field. And of course, we always think, back to the barn management acronym that Teryn taught me way back in school, FLAWS, right? Feed, light, air, water, sanitation. Those things amongst the birds themselves can all, play factors into what kind of results you get out. But those are the results that are important because, the research that I'm interested in and that we're interested in is research that can be implemented right on farm. And, so keeping those things in mind. But it's challenging when you're trying to interpret results because, when you're comparing a farm to another farm, you're obviously not comparing apples to apples. They can both be conventional broiler flocks with the same number of birds in the barn, but they are completely different sites and they are managed completely differently at times. So it's always something that we keep in the back of our minds when we're interpreting information that we get from research. But that's what makes it interesting, is that you can have, in theory, in a textbook, two, similar management systems, but get two completely different results. And those are the nuances between the results. That's what matters. And so that's our job, is to figure out where those differences lie.
Yeah, birds really don't read the textbook, and they're living beings, right? Like it's one thing to have, experiment that you're doing on a bench top somewhere under controlled conditions, everything sanitary and aseptic, but we're working with barns where, there's feed, like Chantel said, there's all kinds of different factors that go into it. And sometimes things don't go your way. So I think the biggest thing is just patience and like innovating, I guess, and just being flexible and adapting to what the needs of the birds are while you're doing research.
How are your findings influencing poultry farming practices today?
Well, I can speak a little bit on the bronchitis project. So, one of the interesting findings from that 10-week project was that we found that 82% of Alberta producers were vaccinating for bronchitis. And if we compare this, let's say, to our US counterparts, which are vaccinating virtually 100% of their flocks, it lets us know that there are some flocks in Alberta that are not being vaccinated. And actually, as a result of that study, we did have some flocks that started vaccinating for bronchitis, as an example. And why? Well, it's because we actually found bronchitis in flocks that were not vaccinated for it. So it was an important finding for us, and specifically for that site. So that's the interest of, doing research on farm has, very quick application potentially for some of these places.
Yeah, and like to add to that, I think when we're doing these field research studies, like this really took off when Chantel was a student with us and started her project, and the interest from the producers and how they would follow up and want to know, and they would want to discuss more. It really speaks to that relationship that you have when you're on farm, and you're able to, like, now the studies that we'll do based off of Chantel's first study or preliminary study is based off of more producers' questions and more concerns that are coming from the heart of Alberta poultry.
How do people get in touch with you guys?
So we have it set up. We have 2 clinics. They're in Red Deer and Lethbridge. And so we have it set up that you can reach our office during business hours, just at the phone number, and then there's always a veterinarian available for emergency postmortems or for consultations or discussions. And that phone number is 403-314-2216. And then our clients have our cell phone numbers too. And so we just make sure somebody's always on call all the time. And they can, if one of us is not available during an emergency time, then the other veterinarian's phone numbers will be on our cell phones. So there's always a way to get a hold of one of us.
Well, Dr. Teryn,
And if you're interested in if you're interested in kind of the clinic goings on as a whole, we have an Instagram page where we post, fun things what we're up to. I think we have a Facebook as well. It's a bit less active, and a LinkedIn. And we have a website as well with all the information about the team and what we do and different services that we offer.
Well, keep up the good work, Dr. Teryn, Dr. Hayley, Dr. Chantel. Thanks for hopping on today.
Thank you for
Thanks
having
so much,
us.
Jim.